It's a subject that's rarely spoken about, yet up to 50% of women will experience pelvic organ prolapse to some degree. And as you'll hear, that number includes me. What is it? Well, pelvic organ prolapse is used to describe what happens when one of the organs in your pelvis, so the bladder, uterus, or rectum, slip down from their usual position. Some of us may have a degree of prolapse and not be aware, but without intervention, it can get worse and start causing symptoms, including a sensation of bulging or a dragging discomfort, incontinence, leaking, or even feeling like your bladder is not emptying fully. In other words, this creates misery for millions. And my guest today, Holly Puddephatt, experienced prolapse after the birth of her 3-year-old daughter. Her symptoms, as she'll describe, were severe and devastating. But as a Pilates instructor, Holly was determined to improve her condition and to do it naturally. And after doing a lot of research into exercises and, crucially, a transformative breathing technique, she's been able to turn her situation around. She's now made it her mission to free other women from the misery of prolapse. You'll find her platforms linked in the description below, and today she's going to share how she was able to step out from the shadow over her life caused by pelvic organ prolapse. Holly, thank you so much for joining me and for being not only willing to talk about something that a lot of people might feel embarrassed to share, but really for taking this issue on and doing as much as you can to help others get over the discomfort and misery, frankly, of pelvic floor problems and prolapse. I am no stranger to this issue myself, which we're going to come on to as we get into our conversation. But I wanted to start, if you would, by just taking us back to Thea's birth and how it went, whether you had any signs in the weeks and months after that something wasn't quite right, or when you became aware that something had changed.
Yeah, so Thea is my first and only child. So I think the first thing to say is, with your first pregnancy and birth, you don't really know what's normal or what to expect. So it's quite hard after to even know if anything feels slightly out of place. But I was induced at 39 weeks. Earlier on in my pregnancy, I'd suffered with quite severe COVID and developed a blood clot on my lung. So I was being heavily monitored by the consultant. And as I got closer to being full term, my lung capacity was reduced anyway from her being big, obviously, and I just couldn't really breathe very well, the scarring from the COVID and stuff. So they decided, just as a matter of precaution, to induce me. I naively probably wanted to not know too much so that I could just go into it and deal with whatever needed to happen on the day to bring her into the world safely. So it took 4 days from the start of it to actually get me to the point where they could break my waters. So I think I probably was nowhere near ready to naturally go into labour. It was about 12 hours of active labour, if you like.
Right.
Which involved an epidural, just because an induction makes the contractions very intense. At the point where they were feeling comfortable, I was dilated enough to start pushing, but I ended up pushing basically for well over 2.5 hours, which is a really long time to be pushing. The pushing that I was doing was intense. I was literally passing out in between each push. I was so tired. And anyway, thankfully, the consultant came just to do his rounds and was like, why is this girl still pushing? It's ridiculous. You need to intervene. And that's when they said, we're going to have to use forceps. Again, didn't know loads about it, knew of them. And we're going to need to do an episiotomy, which is a little cut to obviously make way to put the forceps and bring her out. Within 5 minutes of that process happening, she was out. So that was actually in that moment a relief, because obviously I was just beside myself, so tired. 4 days into it, just had nothing left. She came out, she was healthy. We went home. Only issues I really had in the first weeks after were my stitches from my episiotomy got infected 3 times. So I was in absolute agony. I couldn't really stand up, walk, anything, lay down. I could just lay on the side. I hadn't had that cut, and then that was it. It was awful. But the doctors were okay, giving antibiotics and stuff. And then after that, I genuinely, other than feeling extreme heaviness, which I just thought was normal, everything just felt lower, everything felt heavy, everything was swollen, which is obviously normal. I didn't think that was massively out of the ordinary, but in hindsight, like I couldn't stand up for long periods. I felt everything was about to fall out of me. So I think that there was probably some signs in hindsight that things hadn't healed as they should. But when I had like my 8-week checkup with the GP and stuff, and they checked the stitches, they checked the area, nothing was mentioned. So I just thought, okay, things are going okay. Eventually returned back to exercise, kind of felt pretty much like I was back to normal. I didn't feel any major symptoms, and it was actually only when Thea was about 18 months old that suddenly, from one day to the next, I had one symptom which just didn't go away, and that was the sign that led to me ultimately becoming diagnosed with pelvic organ prolapse.
And that symptom?
So we'd been out walking through like the city centre. I'd been carrying Thea a lot. She was like in a clingy phase, and we got home. It was bonfire night, and I honestly thought I'd been on my period a few days before. I'd left a tampon in, which I've never done that, but I've heard people do it. I thought something's there. That was the only feeling I can explain. So I spent that night, it was a Sunday, basically like Googling what could it be, found straight away like everything was indicating towards it being like potentially a prolapse, which was upsetting. Obviously, Google, you know what it's like, it's not the best thing to do. So I kind of stopped and thought I'm going to go to the doctors the next day, which I did, and that's when I got diagnosed.
So your own family doctor, a GP, gave you the diagnosis. You didn't get referred to a gynecologist or anything like that at that point?
I didn't have a great experience with the GP, but I'm grateful they diagnosed me, because I know from speaking to people since that even that can be quite hard to get a diagnosis.
Yes, yeah.
But I went in quite upset. Obviously, I felt really anxious. I was like, I don't know what's going on. And she was just lacked empathy. It's like, what are you getting upset about? Like, what is it you're concerned about? And I was like, well, something's not right, you know, whatever. And she said, right, lie down. And she said to me, yeah, you have got a prolapse. And her like words from there onwards was, ideally, you need to stop lifting Thea up, or just try and minimise the amount of time you're carrying her, lifting her. You need to stop the exercise that you're doing. Make sure you don't lift weights, don't run. I'm like, what,
Just
forever?
stop your life, basically.
Yeah, just stop what you're doing, and just do your pelvic floor exercises. I was like, well, is that going to make a difference? What's going to happen? She was just so blasé about it. She's like, that's all we can really do. I was like, well, can I not see anyone else? Can you not refer me? She was like, no, there's no need. Just go home. You can download this app to, like, it's called the Squeezy app with the NHS. Just go home and do that, and that's it. I literally walked out and I was like, fitness and exercise is a huge part of my life. I'm a Pilates instructor for a start. It's not just a case of stop exercising, stop everything like that. So I just felt like my life's over. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't even lift Thea up. I was just like reeling from it, really.
It's a feeling I know, and I actually only ever saw anybody else describe it like that when I saw your description on your Instagram posts. And I thought, that is something I experienced. I mean, I'm nearly 52 now, but when I'm talking about 37, exactly the same thing. I'd had 2 kids by that point, rough deliveries. And that heaviness that you were talking about for weeks afterwards, just not, the whole thing wasn't great. But this was probably a few years after I'd had my second son. I remember I was writing a book at the time, so I was doing a lot of sitting, and I literally got up, stood up, and I felt something cave in. I felt something pushing, like you said, just like the feeling like it was a tampon, something stuck, something pushing into my cervix, or it was awful. And I thought, what on earth is that? But I probably mine wasn't as severe, because I remember going to my GP and she was a lot nicer. She was trying to help me figure it out, but I was like, there's something pushing in there. I feel like I've had like some kind of rectal collapse or something. And she was like, I can't really feel anything much. But she referred me to a gynecologist, and he said I had a recticell. So that's like a rectal prolapse, but I was feeling it, you know, everywhere by that point. And that gynecologist said, recommended surgery. Mm-hmm. I went to see another one who said, do you know, it's not severe enough, and do your pelvic floors, do them as much as you can, do as much to strengthen that area as you can. That's your best bet. That's probably helped me out a lot. I think I've still got a lot of problems. I'll see if you relate to any of this. Things like lower back pain, especially if I get out of the way of doing it. And I think that's all connected. But what you don't get is a lot of medical expertise around this particular problem to help you connect the dots. It's just like, go and do your pelvic floors, and like, as you say, sorry, but there you were with this horrible feeling when you're walking around that I know so well. How did it feel just day to day, doing your everyday? What was that feeling like?
Yeah, it was awful. I can completely relate to what you were saying about this clenching. You suddenly
Yeah.
become clenching, like you're trying to. The only way I can, my friends ask, "What's it like?" I'm like, imagine something's about to fall out of your vagina and you're trying to hold it in. So like when you're trying to stop yourself weeing, so you're clenching constantly. Everything's aching because you're clenching. There's loads of tension being created. And I think, because I knew that mine hadn't come outside of me. So it was still
Yes.
inside, although my bladder has prolapsed out of position. It's not outside me. I felt like it could come out at any point. That's how it felt. It felt so low because it came on so fast in a way that one thing I did wrong could make it 10 times worse. So
Yeah.
I was on edge, constantly on edge thinking, oh my goodness, but how I am as a person, I'm very proactive, and I didn't just take her first word really. I was quite quick to straight away seek private advice. So I went and paid to see a gynecologist actually. My GP had to refer me to see him, as in, even privately you need a referral from your GP.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
I saw the referral letter where she'd told on there what type of prolapse it was, what grade it was. She never told me any of that. When I went to see him, it was a lot more useful. He was kind of, this is where you are today. This is exactly what's happened. This is what could happen in the future. Here's some options that you could consider. Surgery, like you said, pessaries, various things. I thought, and I said, what's your view on exercise and things? And he was a bit passive. He couldn't really say much. He said, but if I was you, I'd go and see a women's health physio and work with them on that. So that calmed me a lot more after I saw him. And then I did straight away find a women's health physio, again, all self-funded, because there was just no option of that being paid for by the NHS or my GP.
No.
And my physio has really saved me, to be honest. She's really educated me, she's calmed me down, and she's helped me so much, which I can talk more about. But I think, a lot of people stop at the minute they walk out of the GP door and don't do any of that stuff that I did. And then they're still living the life like that years later. And that's the people that I speak to a lot through sharing my story. And that's what breaks my heart, because if I was still living in fear, clenching with all that tension and feeling I couldn't even pick my own daughter up, I don't know what state of mind I would be in by now.
No, it's utterly miserable. It's utterly a miserable feeling, and you just can't. Every time you stand up, it's just there. You're so aware of it. It's horrible. What did you decide to do from there then, from that point?
I started to see my physio, and the first conversation I had with her is, look, I don't want to give up exercise. I don't want to do that. And she says, we don't have to. And I remember thinking, so who's lying here? And it almost felt like that. It's like, how can I have such one strong message? And you sort of, I don't know, my view a bit with the NHS is I trust everything they say. So you don't need to stop exercising. This is what we need to do. We just need to work on strengthening your pelvic floor. She's done internal examinations, said, look, your pelvic floor's really weak. So no wonder you probably already had a mild prolapse at some point straight after. And then it's probably got a bit worse because you've not done anything to strengthen the pelvic floor or the area that surrounds, etc. So she was like, that's what we need to work on. And that's great for me. I like it when I've got something I feel I can grab control of. So to say, right, these are your exercises, this is what I want you to start doing. And then I sort of saw her once a month. That gave me something to focus and channel my energy into. But it was hard because I had to give up running. I had to give up anything with impacts. I still don't do any of those things now just because not worth the risk of making anything worse. But I have found a new routine, which I'm happy with. But it's almost like from 1 minute to the next, you go from being like healthy to feeling you've got a chronic health condition that you're going to live with for the rest of your life. It's never going to be healed.
Yes.
It's not really a great surgical intervention you can take. Even if you wanted to, the failure rate of it is really high, which the gynecologist I saw talked me through. When I talk to people, can't you just have surgery? No, I can't just have surgery. So I find that still hard to deal with from being such a fit and healthy person to kind of, I know there's a lot worse things that people deal with. I know there is, but it's like, oh, I've got this thing. It's a part of my identity now. And I find that even now quite difficult because I've lived so many years being free, healthy and been in control of my health. And then I felt like I lost control of it.
Like you said, it's the fact that it's lifelong. And I remember thinking, if it feels like this now, what's it going to feel like when I'm 80? I mean, my mind was blown. I can say that at 52, I think hormone fluctuations actually change it. And with me, as long as I do the pelvic floors, had a milder situation, but I'm pretty, I possibly don't know what normal is now. I think probably it's so long. But I don't feel miserable. When I'm walking around, I don't really notice it. And I find now that I've got kind of a bit of lower back pain. And then from time to time, if I don't keep up with my pelvic floor exercises, I can feel things start to go wrong again. So I can start to feel a bit more heaviness, and I need to get back onto it immediately. I wonder if you agree with this. There's a level of pelvic floor exercise where you hold everything in, and then there's another level that you could go to with a pelvic floor exercise that really makes a difference. And it's almost it's trying to explain what that feels like to people. So when you're coaching people in the best exercises for this, how do you describe the best type of exercises they can do and how to do them?
So I think this is where it gets complicated as well, because if you said to somebody, what kind of how do I train my pelvic floor? People go to Kegels, which is,
Yes.
it's like a squeeze and release kind of thing. Squeeze,
Yes.
release. So it's like I say, imagine you're trying to hold a wee in, you squeeze, like you'd hold the wee in and then like relax it. But the thing that I would say to people is, like, say you wanted to get bigger biceps, you wouldn't just squeeze and release them. Like, that's not really gonna give you a bigger bicep, is it? You need to do more dynamic things. So you need to do like different types of bicep curls or different movements. And I think that's the analogy I like to use with people. If you are somebody who's got a prolapse and a lot of tension, like we both probably were, because we were constantly clenching and holding in, doing those squeezes can actually make the situation worse, because your pelvic floor can become so tense all the time it can't relax. It's called hypertonic. So it's almost like it's constantly tense. So it's weak but tense. It can't relax.
That's the second very wise gynecologist that I went to, who said, don't have surgery because scarring and everything, it can make it worse. He said he thought that a lot of my problem, do you remember how I said I felt this thing push in and then I was kind of panicking and clenching, and then everything just went. I mean, I just remember just being in pain and uncomfortable in the whole area. And he said he thought that was muscle spasm, muscle tension. So exactly as you described.
Yes, that's really common, is that somebody with like a prolapse or heaviness will have created tension just because of the nature of trying to hold everything in. Then they get told to do Kegels, which only makes the whole situation worse because it becomes more and more and more tense. So actually, what I've learned a lot about, and I'm really passionate about, and through my Pilates teaching, I practice this a lot with clients, is that when we breathe properly, so we really take nice big breaths. So most of us now, when we're rushing around, we're just shallow chest breathing. We're not really filling our lungs up, so our diaphragm doesn't move. But when we breathe properly, we really breathe all the way in, fill the lungs up. The diaphragm lifts, so does the pelvic floor. And then when we exhale, it releases. So naturally, we're training our pelvic floor to kind of lift and release without actually squeezing it, so there's no tension there. So I've actually don't do any Kegels at all, and I've managed to strengthen my pelvic floor almost entirely through just practicing. There's a type of breathing called hypopressive breathing, which is becoming more well known. The NHS is certainly starting to show more of an interest in it. But it's this kind of deep breathing, which is lifting the diaphragm, allowing the pelvic floor to lift and release naturally. And the more you train your pelvic floor to work with your diaphragm in that way, day to day, when you're breathing, that's happening of its own accord. And that, for me, has been a really gentle way of increasing my pelvic floor strength without creating any more tension. So it sounds quite hard to think about how to doing it, but it's a really nice deep breath in. If you really breathe all the way in, you almost feel your pelvic floor, and then as you exhale, you feel it relaxing. So you can almost feel this natural movement happening, and that is a really nice way. So hyperpressive breathing is a good thing for people. Can find loads of free resources on YouTube as to like follow guides to how to do it.
I will link to some as well in the description.
Yeah, so I can share some of the ones that I've used. So that's something I've become really passionate about, is actually what are the natural ways that we can train our bodies to work within themselves to help us improve this situation. So really just from doing that, I've taken my pelvic floor strength from when I was first diagnosed a 1 out of 5 to a 5 out of 5. So it's really strong now. And that has massively reduced my symptoms. It's lifted my prolapse up a little bit higher as well. So my pelvic floor is just providing that extra support. I've still
And you
got a
think this is
prolapse.
all through breathing? That
Yeah.
is incredible, because I thought we were going to be having a conversation that was very largely based on Kegels, and that was the only real tool that I had in my box. And
Yeah.
also, I do some strength training, which we'll come on
Yeah.
to just for the wider
Yeah.
area. But that's fascinating, and I keep hearing, interviewing, physical therapists who over in the States who've now become strength trainers, and a lot of health experts talk now about the importance of breathing from the diaphragm, slowing down our breathing, multiple benefits.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. I mean, how do you feel now when you're up and you're walking around? Are you still conscious of all the time, or how does it feel to you day to day?
Basically, I used to have a job similarly where I was sat long periods of the day, and I think after my diagnosis I became quite hyperfixated on the feeling of my prolapse and the symptoms. So it's a bit like anything, the more you look for it, the more you're going to feel it. Then I left that job and I opened my business, which is my Pilates studios that I now own, and I was so busy with that, I couldn't fixate on it because I didn't have the time to. And suddenly I was like, hang on a minute, I'm not noticing my symptoms anywhere near as much. And my physio had been trying to say to me for ages, I think you're really fixated. And I was like, whatever, you don't know it. You did I know I can feel it. And it's so interesting that since I've become busier and busier, I've almost broken that brain to symptom connection. And the one other thing that I think is worth mentioning at this point is that I also have a pessary that I wear. So I don't know if you've seen anything about that, but it's something, well, mine's like a little silicone cube shaped thing that you put in your vagina, and it kind of holds everything up.
Okay.
So I found that really helpful, especially I've gone from like a corporate job to a very active job now. I'm usually on my feet a lot, I'm teaching a lot, I'm doing a lot. So, if you're standing for long periods, sometimes that heaviness can come back. So my pessary, I take it in and out daily. It's no harder or easier to put in or out than like a tampon is. And it just provides a bit of extra support. When I've got that in, I can't feel it at all.
Oh, I mean, which is fantastic. That's like a magic wand.
Yes, exactly.
Because I know the fixation, and anybody listening who has this kind of issue, it's going to apply to a lot of women, are going to know how easy it is to become fixated. So when somebody says, don't think about it, if every time you stand up, you feel something really not right, you just can't help but fixate, and it really gets you down. So would you mind sharing a link with me to what you use? Because I know I will be asked.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And I think, again, because I speak to a lot of women about this, they're a bit anti using that. I don't want something inside me. And I think, well, why not? Just try it out, see how you find it. I mean, for me, it's just stopped me from constantly focusing on those symptoms. And I think that has really helped. And it just feels a bit more supported. If I have long, busy days or I'm walking a lot, where I used to get that heaviness, it's kind of holding everything up, and then I just take it out on a night, and I don't have to wear it every day. It's a kind of take it or leave it situation. So that gives me so much confidence that even in the future, if things got even a bit worse or it felt a bit heavier, or you'll know hormonally times in the month, perimenopause, menopause, etc., all can affect, because the less estrogen you've got, the more heavier everything can feel, the muscles relax a little bit more. Like, I feel confident, at least I'm always going to have that pessary option. I've always got that there as like a backup if I need it, just to feel a bit more supported. So I'm a huge like advocate for use of pessary.
Of course, there's a lot of women who are having incontinence issues, and I mean, do you deal with women like that who through your Pilates classes and so on?
Yeah, that's usually if it's either prolapse or that's the biggest thing I would say, is like people, oh, I'm weeing myself a bit, urine's leaking, either when they're exercising or even in class, especially when they're running or anything. And it's almost like, oh yeah, I've had 2 kids. It's just like an expectation that that's just normal. When I talk to them about why, they actually think like it's a bladder weakness thing, and And I'm like, actually, it's probably nothing to do with your bladder, your pelvic floor's dysfunctioning. So
Right,
straight
okay.
away, people's view is, my bladder's weak because I've had children. Well, having children doesn't affect your bladder, it's your pelvic floor that's weak. So by working on strengthening the pelvic floor up, usually people find that really improves the incontinence issue straight away, whereas in their head, they think it's a bladder thing.
How beneficial do you think it is to strengthen that entire area, including the glutes, which I
Yes.
find my glutes are, or were before I started strength training, very weak.
Yes.
Personally, I found that very beneficial. What's your experience?
Yeah, so I'm a huge advocate alongside strengthening your pelvic floor, strengthening the surrounding muscle groups as well, because of course then there's less pressure coming down onto the pelvic floor. So glutes, exactly. Most women, especially if you've had children, have quite weak glutes because when we're carrying the baby weight at the front, we kind of tilt the pelvis under and the bum just doesn't do anything. So it gets weak and weaker. Like a lot of people talk about having a flat bum after they've had children, and it's usually because they've lost the strength there. So strengthening the glutes, inner thighs, all of the core, like lower abdominals, those kind of things. Like again, if you've had children, you might have quite weakness in your core, your pelvic floor's weak, everything around here is just then weak. So just by strengthening all of those areas up, it's like a more holistic approach to improving pelvic floor dysfunction than just focusing on the pelvic floor itself. So Pilates is amazing for strengthening the core, the glutes, inner thighs, sort of muscles around the area that you might not target otherwise in like the gym. Like you might be doing a squat, for example, in the gym, and your quads and your hamstrings are doing most of the work. Still, the glutes aren't really working. So we really work to like isolate those muscles in Pilates, which is why it's great for kind of prolapse, and it's also really low impact as well.
Squats are a fantastic
Yeah,
exercise for anybody. They've just
yeah.
got so many benefits. I wish I'd been doing those years ago, but I guess, well, you're in your 30s, I'm in my 50s, and we can both say at any age,
Yeah.
these things make a huge difference and you can get your life back.
Oh God, yeah, it's never too late to do anything. I felt really isolated by my age. None of my friends had a prolapse. No one around me knew what it was. I didn't know anyone that had one. I was like, what is going on? There was, why, how has this happened to me? And I think that's what led me to start to share my story quite openly via my social media and stuff, because I've developed like a community of people who are young like me. It's not uncommon, it's just people don't feel comfortable talking about it, and I totally understand why it feels uncomfortable to, like, even when I was first diagnosed and I had two male bosses and I had to go and tell both of them because it was affecting me at work, and it's so uncomfortable. They're like on edge, you're on edge, and it's just, the whole thing's just hard to talk about compared to say you've got, I've got a broken leg or I've broken my arm or something's happened like that. So it's not uncommon at any age, and it's never too late to do something about it, even if you've been ignoring it for 5, 6, 7 years because you're embarrassed. Like, start now, do something. There's always something you can do to help the situation.
I wondered how you feel about this. When I do a little bit of lifting now, so deadlifting, and I find that my awareness of my own situation was heightened doing that, because I thought, gosh, this is putting strain on me where I might not want to have strain. So now I kind of hold everything in when I do my lift to sort of protect it as I do the lift. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that about whether that's a good idea? Because when people go to trainers, I'm guessing, particularly a lot of male trainers, but I suppose the female trainers, if they've never had to deal with it, they wouldn't know either. It's like what you're not doing is guarding your pelvic floor so much. And people would find it awkward to say, look, I might not be able to do that one because I've got this. I mean, what's your recommendation?
So a couple of things. I agree in terms of people's knowledge in the trainers world is really limited. Even the instructors I employ at my studios, I've had to have conversations with them and say, what do you know about pelvic floor? What do you know about the prolapse? Minimal. Even though this is the kind of world we're in Pilates, it's just not really covered in your training. So that's scary in itself, because like you might feel the pluck up the courage to say to your personal trainer, or just to let you know, and then they might look blankly at you and think, I don't really know what to say to this person anyway. So it's not great. But again, going back to the breathing, pressure management on the pelvic floor is really important, whether you're lifting a box up off the floor, whether you're doing a deadlift, whether you're in the gym or whatever. And the easiest way I can explain is that you always need to take a big inhale as you prepare to do the harder part of the movement. So in a deadlift, as you're lowering down, you're going to do a big
Yes.
inhale. Then as you start to do the lift, big exhale. Going back to that point, what's going to happen there? The pelvic floor is going to lift up, and that's going to protect the pressure from being pushed down. A lot of people in like the gym and weights, deadlifts, etc., will brace and hold their breath, and all that.
That's what I've been told to do.
So all that happens is all the pressure gets pushed straight down to the pelvic floor if you just brace and hold your breath. So if you're like doing a bodybuilding competition, then you're probably going to get trained to hold your breath because it helps you do a bigger lift. But for us, we're trying to deal with this. We must make sure we breathe through it. So it'd be like as you were going down to do your deadlift, big inhale, big exhale as you lifted the barbell up, okay, and then you're protecting that pressure downwards.
Okay.
What's going to happen is it's going to protect, but it takes practice. I remember when I first started trying to get that breath work right in exercise, and I could barely count the repetitions I was doing because I was like, what am I doing, breathing, counting, what's going on? But over the course of time, it becomes like a second nature to you. So again, for Pilates, breath's one of our big principles. So we'll always be talking about inhale to prepare, exhale to do the movement, inhale to prepare, exhale to do the movement. It just becomes like a natural thing to do. So I know I can lift my 3-year-old up now really easily as I'm bending down. As I pick her up, big exhale, it's going to protect my pelvic floor from taking that pressure.
That's a great tip. I will try that. Thank you. I also wondered, you mentioned your community there. I mean, what are the sorts of things that people say they've been going along and thinking and just living with this and thinking, well, I'm just going to have to, this is just how it's going to have to be. And then they see your posts. What kind of things do they say to you?
Say, oh my God, thank you for sharing your story. I thought I was the only person. It's really nice to see someone young, fit and healthy who's got the same thing as me. They say it's inspiring to see I actually can do these things, even though I've got a prolapse. So they're the kind of messages that I get all the time. And obviously people just asking me the same sort of questions you are, you know, what exercise can I do? What can't I do? How can I do it? How can I strengthen my pelvic floor? Who should I see? These kind of things. And a lot of people will come to me now to work one-to-one and Pilates and things who have prolapse because they've seen that obviously I've got this expertise in this area. And I've even worked with someone recently who's just had surgery. So we've been doing some rehabs for prolapse surgery. And she said to me, you know, if I'd have worked with you before, I'd have never needed this surgery or gone for it. So I feel passionate about sharing my story and sharing what I do as just a free resource because lucky for me, I turned to Instagram and found a lot of support myself through following other people's stories and learned a lot through that. And if I can add myself into that community of somebody that can give help to others, then that's why I do it, even though it is a bit embarrassing. You know, my dad, some of my work colleagues follow me on there and it's a bit, you know, you're thinking, oh God, my dad's going to read this now or whatever. But, you know,
I bet he's proud though. Do you know, I really do.
So yeah, they're the kind of things though that people say, just that feeling of isolation, even though it affects a lot of people, you kind of feel like you don't know anyone because no one's talking about it, not because they don't have it. I think the other thing we've not really touched on is just how it like affects you in your relationship as well. I mean, I've been so lucky. My partner is just amazingly supportive and not cringed by any of it. But I know, again, speaking to people, that's not always the case. And they don't want the partner to go anywhere near that area. They feel self-conscious about it. And I totally get it. I've had to sort of push past that myself and think, actually, he can't even see it or tell any difference. He's kind of, guys, I think they're not bothered either, but in our head it makes us feel more like less attractive. It's like a part of your body where, oh, something's not as it should be there now. And so it has that effect on your relationship as well, where you just don't feel as confident or attractive within yourself as you might have done before this. And that's not nice either.
You know, childbirth is a wonderful thing, but you know, you can unfortunately walk away with quite a few changes afterwards. And I think that's why it's so positive and so important to say to people you can make the difference through exercise. And do you know, it relates to so much as well, because I just started a little series on the channel where my mum and dad, who are in their 80s, you know, my mum can't hold her back up because she has osteoporosis in her spine and her muscle has wasted. And very similarly with the pelvic floor, you know, when she's gone to see doctors or a physio about it, she's been given, just not enough, the resistance band training, which is not going to bring, if you've only got 15% muscle back in your back, that's not doing much. So she has now started lifting weights and just really going through the motions. It's only been about 6 weeks. We already see a difference in her. I just think the biggest part of this conversation is whatever area of weakness you have in your body at whatever age, is you can do so much.
Yeah, no, you definitely can. And I know it's hard because people don't know where to go, or, it's money, it's like having to pay for it yourself. But I think we're so lucky in this day and age in some aspects. There's so much free resource and information available, but then it's also overwhelming. There's a lot of information. But I found just by doing loads of research, you sort of start to find the common threads of things that, this makes sense. I've tried it, it works for me. And, you don't need to spend loads of money, but definitely as the first part of call for your prolapse and things, I always say, even if you go and see a women's health physio once and pay for it, and it might cost you like £80, just go once, understand your diagnosis and understand how to manage it. Then you don't need to see them again. And actually, you'd probably spend £80 on going out for a meal or something. So everyone probably can afford to spend that money just to get confident about where they're at, what's going on. And then I still see mine every 3 months now, just to let her check it, make sure nothing's worse, everything's still the same. That's my peace of mind. We shouldn't have to pay, and we should push more for the NHS, but it's either that or waiting in a 2-year waiting list to be referred, maybe, or 18 months. And actually by then your mental health could be really impacted. So I think it's worth.
Yeah. And depending, I have a lot of viewers and listeners from overseas, a lot in the States, and each healthcare system has its own challenge, pros and cons, basically. But some of them will be trying to figure out what we're talking about with a 2-year waiting list with our health service. But it's very sad that it's come to that. And as you say, if you can make that small investment, just talking to somebody with some specialist knowledge, just to get that start.
And I think as well, no matter where, America, Europe, women's health physiotherapists, that's the thing everywhere. And, in some countries, I know you have people who would have a birth like mine and probably yours that weren't straightforward, get an automatic referral and go and get that support. We don't get that. But, it's like you said, it's never too late to go and see somebody and just make that little investment into yourself to give you the tools to then feel like you can go and take some control back.
Fantastic. And what you and I can do when we wrap up is just maybe agree some links that I can share with people in the description below for, a few exercises that they can look at, things that don't cost a lot of money, and the device that you were talking about that you use each day as well.
Yeah, no, happy to. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much. This has been so helpful, and keep doing what you do, because it's a real joy to see somebody out there making a noise about this and helping people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was actually the first time I had spoken to anyone else who had experienced pelvic organ prolapse, and just having the conversation was cathartic, as is understanding that this is something that women commonly experience and a condition that can be greatly improved, as we've heard. So I hope you too found today's conversation helpful, or if you know someone it may benefit and bring a bit of comfort and guidance to, then please do share this episode and help spread Holly's message. You'll find in the description links to a couple of the resources that Holly mentioned, showing you how to do hypopressive breathing, along with her own social page. And to make sure you don't miss out on future episodes from me on the Honest channel exploring how to age well, look and feel good for longer, then be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already, or follow the podcast. Below you'll find a link where you can sign up to my free monthly newsletter, rounding up all my latest episodes and the articles and reviews I publish on my website honest.scot, so you don't miss a thing. But for now, thank you for being here today.